Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy Fanatics video on the channel. Today we're going to be looking at my ruck ranks ahead of the 2025 AFL Fantasy season. This can help both with classic and draft formats. For classic, obviously who you can fit in your salary cap and who you'll be picking. Draft as well, this is the sort of order that I'll be using when I'm drafting, so you can use this as a potential guide as well. So we're going through my top 15 rucks today. I was thinking top 10, but I think there's some good names this year, so I thought I'd stretch out to top 15. So we'll discuss those right now, and we'll get stuck into it. But as always, make sure you do smash a like on the video. It takes a couple of seconds, and it really does help out the channel. So thanks, guys, for smashing the like so far. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then make sure you do. I think we're about 60 odd subscribers away from the 3,000 milestone that we've been trying to aim for a little bit now. So if we can get to that, and you can subscribe if you haven't already, make sure you do. I think about half of you that watch the videos on the channel haven't subscribed yet. So all you got to do is click a button and help us get to that 3,000 mark. So if you can do that, that'd be very much appreciated. But let's get stuck into the ruck rank. So I think the top four of the rucks really sort of say themselves. It's the top four that are the most expensive. And I think the top five are the $1 million players. And I think that they're the top five. I think the top two are clear. And currently at number one, I've got Rowan Marshall currently at number one. It was tough to split him and Xerri in terms of who I'd potentially take at number one, because these two guys are going 1 and 2 in your draft. It's pretty simple. I think that they're going number 1 and 2, Marshall and Xerri. Sheasel's probably 3, and there's an argument to be made that Sheasel could even be that number 1 or number 2 pick, but I think Xerri and Marshall are the guys there. I've got Marshall just ahead, I think just because of the fact that I still see him as the number 1 ruck. I know that St Kilda's on Harry Boyd, and he looks like a potential good player for the future for them. They've also got Max Heath there as well. I just think that he's just so valuable as that ruckman that can also play as an extra midfielder and get around the ground, that I think he's too valuable to not have him as the number 1 ruck. So I've got him there. He's obviously had back-to-back seasons over 115. He was top scoring player last year as well. And he had a couple of injury affected. We had an injury affected game last year against Port Adelaide. I think he did. He had a bit of a knee injury, scored around that 70 mark, and also got towed up against Max Gawn in another game where he only got about a 70 odd. Wanted him to be a little bit less as well. So there's probably not much upside in terms of picking him in classic. You're picking him there for set and forget. If someone said to me Marshall can average 120 this year, I wouldn't be shocked. I think that's probably his ceiling. But I think, yeah, he's probably not going to improve a huge amount. You'd be wanting him to stay at his current price. And I think he can stay around that 115 average, which I think would be a solid pick in classic. So I'm definitely considering it classic. I think if Harry Boyd gets named round 1, that would obviously be a bit of a spanner, and we might pivot then. But I still think Marshall's going to be number 1. So I've got him just edging out Xerri as well. And I like the early fixture run as well if you do start him in classic. Like, he's got Geelong in there, Richmond in there, back-to-back, 2 really good matchups. Adelaide, Port, Giants are okay, and then Bulldogs as well is pretty good. So I like that early run. He's also got West Coast in round 10, Carlton if it's just a Koning in round 9, which is pretty good. So I think that I like those fixtures, and I think in classic you can start him, and I think in draft he's number 1 or number 2 pick, and I would take him at number 1. Xerri's number 2. He was fantastic last year. I think Mitch was saying from the Ball Boys, averaged 105 pre-buy, 125 post-buy, and went at 140 odd in his last 5 games. So that 140 is obviously unsustainable, but could he average near that 120 mark? I think he can. I think that the tackles are going to stay. That's sort of, you either have the tackling or you don't, and he's got the tackling, and that's just the sort of player he is. He's obviously likes to throw his weight around and sort of get physical in the contest, which is obviously very good for North Melbourne and what Xerri does for his game, and for us as fantasy coaches, racks up those tackles. His marks improved as well. And I don't think that was something that sort of just came out of the blue. You could see him getting used to that number 1 ruck role, coming into his own, and start of the year wasn't clunking them. He was going up, he was dropping a few, and you just think if he could just hold on to a couple of marks. And he started doing that in the back half of the year, which is why we saw his average jump from that 105 well over that 115 mark. So it was those marks and obviously the tackling that really got him there, I think. So whether he can maintain I think his tackles are maintained. It's can he maintain the possessions and the marks there? That's going to be the big question. His early fixture run isn't great. I don't love the fact. So English round 1's good. Then he's got Gawn, O'Brien, Grundy, Witts. That's a pretty tough month to come after that. Starts to open up a little bit more as we get closer to those mid-season buys. So do you think maybe could he be a guy that you don't start in Classic? I still like starting him in Classic. 53% owned would be scaring me as well if I didn't start him, just because the ceiling that he's got. If he gets off to a flyer and you're not one of the people that own him, you could be left a little bit behind. So it's tricky. I think draft is a top 2 pick. I think he's a second pick for me. But again, I think it's a coin flip between Marshall and Xerri. If someone said they're taking Xerri, pick one. I couldn't argue with that at all. So, yeah, I think they're the top 2. I've currently got both of them in my Classic side as well. I'm currently on set and forget, and we'll see if that is the way I stay as we get closer to the season starting. Max score number 3, and probably a little bit forgotten as well with the top 2. Average 112 last year with some injuries in the second half of the season. Obviously, Oliver had a terrible season last year with a lot of stuff going on and off the field. Petrarca obviously missed half the season with that bad injury. And Viney couldn't sort of pick it all up himself. They just struggled as a whole. So the fact that he still averaged a career best 111.8 in a year where Melbourne really, really struggled is a positive. And I think that there could potentially be some value. The thing that I think that scares a lot of people is the age 33, right? It's not great when you obviously say that over 30 rule. We don't like picking players over 30. I think Rucks are a little bit different. They can go a little bit longer, but yeah, it's tough when he is at near 1.147 million. You're paying a lot of money for it. So I think that it's funny because this could be a pick where 6.5% owned. It could get you off to a flying start. Got some good fixtures early. I know coach panel were talking about that. It's just the age is probably the thing that is not sort of what I'm really looking at. But Xerri and Marshall as well. I think the top 3 are the top 3. And if someone told me Gawn's going to be number 1 averaging player this year, I wouldn't be shocked. We've seen him do it before, and I could see it happening again. I just think I've got a little bit more confidence in Marshall and Xerri in both Classic and Draft, and I'd be taking them. But I still think Gawn is a top 5, 6 pick. I think he still goes. I think obviously you got your top 2. Obviously Marshall Xerri, you probably got Sheasel. And then does Gawn go at 4, maybe? Does he go there? Do you see like a Merritt or a Brayshaw or a Dawson or a Bont or a Dacos or one of those midfielders go off? Maybe you see a few of those go off. But I think Gawn is definitely a first-round pick and probably a top 5 pick. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what drafts happen. I think if you've got like a 3-4-1-3 formation instead of the 5 midfielders and there's more sort of a premium on the rucks, then Gawn could go at number 3 or number 4. But yeah, I think Gawn is a top 5, 6 pick, and in Classic could be a bit of a smoky pod if you're not going for a Marshall or a Xerri. Tim English is at my number 4. Struggled last year with that rule change in the ruck, obviously being able to extend the arm. He obviously doesn't win a huge amount of hitouts, and people think with Sam Darcy last year that was a bit of a reason why he dipped, but he still attended about the same amount of ruck contests. It was more his kicks and his stoppage work and contest stuff around the ground that dipped, and that's what happened. So 104.6 average is still nothing to turn your nose up at as well. He's obviously got the capabilities averaging over 115. We saw it when he was the number 1 scorer only 2 seasons ago in 2023. So can he get back to that level? I think everything went right for him in that year, but again, I think a 110, 112 average is on the cards potentially. Do I think he'll get there? I think he's probably more around that 105-ish mark, maybe 107, but still, I think he's the number 4 pick. His draft range actually is going to be really interesting to see what people do with drafts. Because I think the top 3 go in the first round, but then do people wait for English? Does he go in round 2? I think he'd go anywhere from rounds 2 to rounds 4, as late as round 4, depending on the sort of the structure and formation in terms of drafts. Again, I think he's still number 4, and whether you get him or not, it's going to be tough because someone might go early on him, and I think most likely they will, so you probably won't get him, but yeah, I think English, he's got the chance to improve back. And in Classic, I think he's not cheap enough, I think, to take that risk. Even though it's not much of a risk because you're still going to get a Ruckman averaging over 100. But I think when he's not that far off of a Marshall, Xerri, and even a Gawn, I'd be paying up for one of those 3 or 2 of the 3 if you're doing set and forget. So English and just a bit of that middle ground as well. But I don't hate the pick if you were pretty confident he gets back to 110 and the other guys take a bit of a dip as well. So that'll be what'll be interesting to see in with the Rucks this year. I've still got Nate number 5. I think he's just safe. He averaged 101 last year from 21 games. 100.6. Just gets it done. and Richmond will struggle. I think that Nank will be relied upon even more in the midfield. Can he up that average? Maybe to a 102, 103 potentially, but I think he's probably around that, anywhere from that 98 to 102 range. I think he's probably where he average. I think he's still a top 5 ruck, but you could pretty much sort of blanket over the next sort of 4, 5, 6 rucks, I think, because they could all really sort of boost their numbers up and get the job done. So at number 6, I've actually got Darcy Cameron as well. 96. I think he had an injury last year as well, which kept that average down. I could see him averaging 100. I think he's got that in him to average 100 in a season as well. He's a clear number 1 ruck for Collingwood as well. Classic is tough. He's not, again, just in that middle ground. I'd rather pay it for one of those other guys. But draft, I think you can get him a little bit later after those sort of top 4 or 5 go. And you can get him a little bit later if you want a real solid ruckman to get. So I like Darcy Cameron, and more draft relevant, probably not classic relevant. So I think the top 4 have got classic relevance. I think there's a couple here that don't quite have fantasy relevance until they get a little bit cheaper. So I've got Brodie Grundy at number 7 still. I thought about bumping him down a tiny bit more. We saw him have a fair few games last year where he struggled, but he also had some good games as well with some big scores. So he averaged 97.1 last year. I see him around that 95 to 100 mark still. Could dip maybe to a 93, 92 sort of average, but I still see him around that 96, 97, 98 average. And if you're getting that as a ruck, I think it's a pretty safe pick. So that's why I've got him at number 7, probably for safety there. And again, he's got the ability to average 100. So that's why I've got him at number 7. Tom de Koning is at number 8. So I've put him at number 8. And this is, again, is if he gets his solo ruck right. If he doesn't get solo ruck, he'd be bumped down. He'd probably be outside the top 15, to be fair, if he's sharing it with Pitney. But we saw last year, I think he averaged over 100. I think he's like 104 when he was rucking solo last year. So there's the upsides there. He had just shy of points per minute when he was a solo ruck to a Tristan Xerri, and we obviously saw what Tristan Xerri did last year. So I think you can look at a potential ceiling if everything was to go right of a 105 sort of average, and that would be a fantastic pick in classic. Obviously, the question is that going to happen? Is Pitney going to play? Obviously, we've seen the stats. I think Mitch is the first one to put it out. They were 9-1 when De Koning was solo, and then they were 4-10 or something like that, or 4-9 when he was sharing with Pitney. So, but we've seen Voss has liked to play Pitney. He's liked that setup. Curnow with an injury as well in the preseason knee injury. He should be right for round 1, but who knows? If he doesn't play, De Koning probably be more forward, which means Pitney will play. It'd just be interesting to see how it all works out. He's got the ability, I think, to go at about that 100 mark. But I see him more as a 95 averaging, because I still think that Pitney will come in for the odd game or two. And 95 in classic, is that 7 points of upside enough to warrant starting him instead of starting a Xerri, Marshall, or even a Gawn? It's a couple of 100k to get up, like 250, 300k to get up to one of those big guys. So it's 200k, it's about 200k, sorry, to get up to one of those big guys. So is it worth it? No, hang on, I was right, wasn't I? Xerri's 1.175, yeah. So it's about 275k to get up to Xerri, and it's about 300k to get up to Marshall. So it's a steep jump, and if it does work for your classic team as well for that salary, then by all means it could be a pick. And if Pitney's not there round 1, I'll consider it myself. But at the moment, I've gone set and forget. I just think there's a bit more safety. And in draft as well, I feel like if you draft to Koning and you're bullish on him, you could take him ahead of maybe a Grundy and potentially even probably not a Cameron is interesting if you take him before him or not. But then if you get to Koning, you probably want to pair him with someone that's solid. So someone towards the back end of the top 15 rucks. You want to pair him with someone solid in case it doesn't work. You've got someone to replace him. So de Koning, I've bumped him up there for the potential. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because he could be top sort of 6, but he could also be in near the bottom of the 15. Number 9, I've got Kieran Briggs. I don't mind Briggsy. If he didn't have that early buy, I think it would be even more of a play. Very lowly only classic. 938k, had dealt with injuries last year, but the fact he still averaged 91.5 is pretty good. He had a busted shoulder for most of last year, playing with it sore. We saw a lot of games he'd come off and he'd have pretty long stints on the bench with that shoulder. A bit like Sicily in a way. I think both of them struggled with the shoulder issues, but fully fit, ready to go, full pre-season. I think he can definitely bump this up to 95 plus, and I see a world where he could go 100. I do. It's a bit like Darcy Cameron, where I could see that happening. And again, I could bump him up a few spots. He could definitely go up to like 6 or 7 potential upside there. So I've just got him down a little bit. There's probably a bit more safety in a Cameron and a Grundy. That's why I've got him down. And I think Koning's got more upsides. So that's why I've gone him ahead. But Briggs, I don't mind. In Classic, probably a bit... It's hard with that round 2 bye, right? You get one game, you get Max Gawn. So you get Darcy, Cameron, Max Gawn, then the bye. Not great. But if you like what you see in opening round, then maybe round 1, you could jump on him in round 3 if you pick a ruck and they aren't working. Because he'll still be at a cheap enough price you can jump on. But Briggsy, I don't mind. He's got a ceiling as well. So I think in draft, he's a pretty good pick later on in the rounds as well. Sean Darcy, I've got at number 10. A really, really interesting pick this year in both draft and classic. So again, if you go him in draft, definitely get another ruck to pair with him, whether that's Luke Jackson, the forward line, or whether that's with another ruck maybe a little bit later. Like I think Big O's, a lot of people like drafting him as that backup ruck. He's just pretty safe for about an 80 odd average. Darcy's got the ability to go 90, 95. We've seen it before. He's averaged 100, obviously when he was top of the ruck charts before, obviously Marshall and Xerri, that he was up there with like the likes of Max Gawn and stuff like that. So he's got the ability to average 95 and beat 18 points under, or 17, 18 points unders, which would be a fantastic pick in classic. It's just the injury risk, right? So he's apparently shedded about 15 odd kilos in the preseason, which I think would be good for Big Sean Darcy. So yeah, in classic, I'm probably not going to go there personally. Probably a bit too risky for my liking. But if he's looking good in the practice games and the match sim games and stuff like that, then maybe he's a guy that you potentially pick. Best 18 as well, rounds 2, 3, 4. So as long as he gets through round 1, you got the best 18 to hide behind. And he's got a pretty good opening run as well. He's obviously Grundy's not great, but Geelong's good, West Coast good, Western Bulldogs is good, Richmond's good. Obviously, Melbourne's tough. So he's got 2 tough matchups in round 2 and round 6, but the other games are pretty good. So good early run to what you want from a guy that's a bit cheaper and a bit of value. So classic, potentially. Draft, I'd want to probably handcuff him with some, but I don't mind taking Darcy with the upside of potentially 95 around, or even a little bit more. Jordan Sweet, I've got at number 11. So I think he'll be number 1 ruck for Port. I think Soldo will be back up for him. I think Sweet has taken that number 1 spot. I thought he was going to when he got signed and traded to Port. I thought he was just going to be number 1 ruck, and obviously he probably sort of catapulted my season a little bit last year when I traded Xerri down to Sweet, which wasn't great, and then got Sarong on the other end. So yeah, not great. I got the 140 from Sarong, but anyway, Sweet, I think he's number 1 ruck. He had some big scores, but he also had some middling sort of 75, 80, 85 scores in there as well when he was solo ruck. So it's going to be interesting. So I'm really keen to watch him in the preseason to see how he looks. I think he could be value in classic, priced at nearly essentially 82. Probably a bit safe. He's safer than Sean Darcy, and arguably safer than Koning because he's the number 1 ruck. But then again, maybe not, because Soldo could play as well. So it's a preseason watch for me. I think draft, again, I think if you take the punt him, I think could be pretty solid. I think he's going to be an 85-ish minimum sort of ruck. He's obviously got the ability to go 90, 95 average, I believe. So he's got the upside. So classic, you could start him. Draft, solid pick. So I've got him at number 11. And yeah, if I'm liking what I'm seeing in the preseason, could even bump inside that top 10. Lloyd Meek is at number 12. I think we saw a really good improvement from him last year, averaged 88.4 from his 19 games. I think he's clearly the number 1 ruck. I think he's definitely bumped Reeves out, and Reeves is just back up at this point. And Meeks showed an ability at the back half of the year that he's got a ceiling as well. So if he didn't have that early buy, he'd be another one that you could consider in classic. He's 7k more than Koning, and he's arguably safer in terms of his role. I do see Reeves more as a backup and not someone that's going to come in. They're not going to play Meek and Reeves. It just didn't work last year. So Meek's the number 1. Prime age of 26. And I believe that he can definitely go over 90 this year and push that 95 mark. It's just that early buying classic probably steers me away a little bit. And there's a couple other options I probably prefer just. But in draft as well, I think he's a really... If you're waiting on Rucks, I think Meek is a really good pick later on. He's got the ability to go well over 90, and arguably I could have him over Jordan Sweet and even a Darcy. So it's funny because, as I said, I think top 7's probably where I'd keep it. I think from 8 through to 12, 13, I think that they're all under a blanket, and Meek could be the number 7 or 8 ruck this year. Koning could be. All of them could be. So this is just currently what I've got them in order in terms of classic and draft relevance. But Meek's got the ability to go definitely inside the top 10. Riley O'Brien, number 13. He's just, again, pretty safe. Average 91 last year. Probably a little bit disrespected in terms of he could easily be higher in my rankings as well. He's averaging over 91's definitely nothing to be sniffed at as well. Has games where, I know me and Jordox talk about on the pod when we do mention O'Brien, but he has games where he clunks everything, and he'll have other games where he just can't mark anything. So hopefully he can remove those games where he drops those marks and get at least a couple, and maybe that average goes up towards that 95 marker. But I think he's around that 90 mark. I think anywhere from 88 to 92 is probably what I've got him around. So I think it's a safe pick as well. I know that Mitch in a mock draft, I saw him do on a video that he took to Koning and then he had Riley O'Brien as his backup. I quite like that play, actually. If you go to Koning and O'Brien, you get a safe guy that's going to average around that 90 mark, and Koning's got the ability to go 100. So, yeah, I like that pairing in draft if you even looked at doing that. But O'Brien, obviously, a few of these aren't as classic relevant. I don't think O'Brien is classic relevant. Obviously, he's not owned by too many. I think he's more just a draft ruck, but he's a pretty safe draft ruck at that. Jared Witts as well, coming at number 14. So very similar to a Riley O'Brien, just safe. Averaged 96 last year from 16 games. I see that dipping a little bit. I see him closer towards that 90, 92 averaging ruck. He's obviously got the ability to average that 95 to 100, but probably see him regressing a tiny bit. I think he won't be as required as much to do the heavy lifting if Gold Coast can win some more games. I think that it'll be the midfielders and the forwards that'll take a little bit more of that burden. So I think his average dips just, but he could also go the other way. If West Coast start doing, sorry, not West Coast, I see West Coast as his next opponent. That's why I said West Coast. Gold Coast, if Gold Coast start that step up, does he average 98, 100? Does he go back up towards that triple figure average? So he's definitely got the ability. I think, and again, argument, he could easily be higher on my rankings. I've just got him down because I do think he dips a little bit in average. So I think he drops down a tiny bit. But he's an interesting one and probably a bit disrespectful as well, being at number 14. But there are just so many good rucks. Like the top 15, I think, are pretty solid. And number 15, I've got Oscar McInerney, who average of 86 last year from his 22 games. He's just safe. Again, he's a really good backup ruck if you pick him there. And if you really are punting rucks and you're in a really deep league of like 16 teams or something like that, then I think he's a good ruck that you can just wait on. But again, most leagues, 10 teams, 12 teams, you probably pick him as a backup. And I think he's a really good backup ruck in draft. So, yeah, I don't mind him as a backup ruck. And I normally target Big O as well later in drafts if I don't get my hands on like an O'Brien or a Witts or a Meek or someone like that a little bit later. So, yeah, I think, that's pretty much where I've got my top 15 rucks. So, yeah, bit of a shorter video this one. It felt pretty quick for me. But, that's where we will end the video. That's the top 15 rucks in terms of where I would rank them. Let me know in the comments below as well what you guys are doing in Classic and who you're starting in your rucks this season. And let me know as well who you got your eyes on in draft as well and who you're pretty keen on to maybe even take a punt on and even sort of pick them a little bit higher than where they're going as well. Let me know in the comments, and any other questions you've got as well, put them in the comments below. But as always, smash a like on the video. We very much appreciate if you guys can smash that big thumbs up, and also make sure you do subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We've got another video coming out on Thursday as well, so looking forward to chatting with another guest there. I won't reveal too much yet until we get to the Thursday, but looking forward to that. And yeah, really keen for this season to get started. If you haven't checked out our Rucks video as well, on the Sunday just gone with DT Lemon, make sure you do. Apologies, Jordox didn't put his mic on mute, and there was some clattering of plates and cutlery and everything, so it's quite funny there. But yeah, make sure you guys check it out. Really good info. DT Lemon, one of the smartest minds going around, so really good to get him on the pod. And obviously we've got our forward episode on Sunday night, so if you guys want to tune in live, make sure you do. We're live every Sunday night at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time and 4:30 p.m. Perth time. Obviously 5:30 p.m. in Perth when daylight savings finishes, but for now it's 4:30 Perth time. We're going to be live every Sunday night essentially till November when we do like AFLW after the men. So yeah, if you guys got nothing to do on a Sunday night, want to tune in and ask questions and stuff in live chat, make sure you do. Be good. Obviously our round one show should hopefully be massive and get a heap of people in there post round one, even post opening round as well, and there's plenty to discuss. But footy's close. We're getting closer, and we've got one more positional preview on the channel to go. So everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys in the next video. So thanks guys for tuning in. I'm out. Cheers.